I am also calling for a criminal original jurisdiction trial in the Supreme Court of Donald Trump for insurrection. There are provisions. I'm Bobagain Kearney Jr., a Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in a May 24th Republican special primary election for Minnesota's 1st Congressional District. You just saw my speech at the March 26th Olmsted County Republican Convention end abruptly amid loud booing. I'm making Donald Trump the issue in this campaign. He must be stopped. With over 25 candidates and campaigns represented at the convention, we each had only 2 minutes. Mine didn't quite make it that long. The May 24th Republican primary is open to all 1st District Minnesota voters, including independents and Democrats. I'm asking you personally and everyone from all parties or from no party to help stop Donald Trump, who I believe was elected in 2016 as the direct but-for result of widespread and proven interference by Russia and Putin in our election. Today in Ukraine, we see the result of Russia's disastrously successful 2016 regime change in America continue to unfold. We can and must move American politics above and beyond Trump's politics of serving Russia's agenda by dividing America. Fellow Republicans and all Minnesotans, I'm Bobagain Kearney Jr., and I'm seeking the Republican Party's endorsement and nomination for governor of Minnesota. I believe at the state level, the Minnesota Republican Party has been taken over by Donald Trump on a de facto basis, and as a consequence, I believe the state party has wrongfully canceled me. So my convention endorsement campaign is essentially a protest. I've been more active in speaking at 1st Congressional District conventions and want to thank 1st District Republicans for continuing our long tradition of letting everyone speak and participate. But with this tradition under attack, I am planning to run for governor in the primary. All Minnesota primaries, including the 1st District's May 24th special primary for Congress, are open to all voters for a reason: to allow we the people to define by our voting choices what our political parties are and what they represent. Frankly, I believe the Republican Party needs help from everyone to reverse the personality cult it has become. Regarding the U.S. House 1st District special election, my central reason for running in that election is to start reversing what I see as successful Russian regime change in America, carried out in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. My goal is to legally prevent Trump from being on the ballot in 2024. But we need to start with something that is reshaping our reality: the situation in Ukraine. This war is an horrific tragedy. It could possibly have been avoided. Unfortunately, we are beyond that point now. Our challenge today is to try to find a way to end it. At a minimum, we must have a ceasefire. We must recognize 4 basic realities. First, the war may go on for months or years to come. Second, Russia sees not Ukraine, but Europe and America as their enemy. Third, the situation is incredibly dangerous. Our first priority must be to reduce the danger, and especially the danger of any use of nuclear weapons by anyone. Fourth, as to the economic aspect of the war, the West and America are both at risk of a recession or worse. More specifically, our physical and technological infrastructure may be very difficult to protect against all kinds of attacks from Russia and from elsewhere, calculated to damage our economy. All our budget and policy planning and all our political discourse must be rethought and reshaped based on these four realities. To restate my central issue, Trump's 2016 election represents successful Russian regime change in America. That is central to this speech. But there may be another related and equally vital issue for us to consider: possible Western and American regime change in Ukraine. Frankly, America has a long history of instigating regime changes and regime management all over the world. We need to face up to this, and we need to examine the striking similarity of the career paths of Trump and Ukraine's current president, Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump went national with The Apprentice and The Celebrity Apprentice. He then used his celebrity as a base to launch a successful presidential campaign. Zelensky did the same thing. He was a successful actor and producer who in 2003 formed a production company. That production company launched the TV show Servant of the People, starring Zelensky. As with Trump, Zelensky then used his celebrity as a base to launch his own successful presidential campaign in Ukraine. The premise of the TV show itself, let's call it Servant of the People Release 1.0, was that an improbable course of events, including a student-led viral social media launch, could lead a 30-something high school history teacher who lives with his parents, played by Zelensky, and who is upset and angry about political corruption, to be elected president of his country. In the TV series, Zelensky delivered a profane anti-corruption rant that was captured and posted to the internet by a student. Here's that fictional rant, which we might see for all practical purposes as Zelensky's actual political platform, the one that elected him president of Ukraine twice, first in a fictional TV series, and then in 2019 as Ukraine's real president in their real national election.
Достало это. Петрович, ну чё ты? Надоело уже мне это все. Математика, царица наук у вас. Ну хорошо, математика. А история, как ты сказал, собачья. Потом мы удивляемся, а почему наши политики каждый раз приходят к власти и совершают одни и те же ошибки? Да потому что они охуенные математики. Знают только, как отнимать, делить и приумножать свое. Вот и все.
Петрович, я сроду тебя таких слов не слышал. Че ты завелся?
Потому что достали все эти вот здесь, понимаешь? Теперь они заставляют детей будки ваши строить. Знаешь, почему у нас жизнь собачья? Да потому что мы свой выбор с тобой начинаем в будках. Понятно? А выбирать-то не из кого. Из двух пи***цев выбираем меньше. И так 25 лет подряд. Ты знаешь, что интересно? В этот раз ничего не поменяется. Знаешь почему? Потому что ты, мой батя, я, мы снова выберем пи***ца. Да потому что да, понятно. Конечно, он пи***ц, да ну лучше его, те-то хуже.
Вась, да пойдем хряпнем, у меня заначка есть.
Что мне приходят эти потом пи***цы власть? Пи***т и пи***т, пи***т, и пи***т, ударение разное, смысл один и тот же. И всем по... Понимаешь, тебе по... мне по... нам всем по... Не по... на маленький, понимаешь, а здоровый такой, по... пришел нам всем. А меня бы на одну неделю туда отправить. Если бы можно было, я бы был устроен. Кортежи, на... Льготы ваши, на... Дачи, на... Всех вас, сука, на... Чтобы простой учитель жил как президент. А президент этот, сука, жил как учитель. Это я тебе, как учитель истории, говорю. Хотя тебе
Однак далеко не всі визнають результати виборів. Приміром, Жанна Борисенко у Твіттері назвала вибори черговим цирком. А от найближчий конкурент Голобородько, лідер фракції «Визволителі» Сергій Карасюк був більш багатослівним.
Это честные выборы? Это плевок в лицо демократии, это я вам скажу. Мы будем оспаривать в суде решение по этим выборам. Кто такой Голобородько? Кто это? Откуда он взялся, а? По всем опросам я лидировал, по всем округам. Я полгода езжу, общаюсь по регионам с избирателями. А Голобородько что? Один раз поматюхался в Ютубе и все? Я в это не верю.
Кстати,
Голобородько Лобородько выиграл даже в
Вот
тех
же
законах,
трамвай.
в которых мы уже все порешали.
We'll be viewing selected clips from Servant of the People from here on out. This fictional candidate sounds a lot like a real American politician, Louisiana's Governor and Senator Huey Long, whose everyman a king politics was seen as a real threat to FDR's reelection before Long was apparently accidentally killed by his own bodyguard in 1935. So, the rant went viral and led to a secret social media campaign launched by his students to elect him president. That's the plot of Zelensky's fictional Ukrainian TV show launched in 2015, the same year that Donald Trump was launching his real campaign for President of the United States. By 2019, Zelensky had launched his own real campaign for President of Ukraine. He was elected with 73% of the vote. Let's now start to compare our two celebrity politicians. Trump's political foundation was built by Jeff Zucker, NBC's boss when it launched Trump's TV show The Apprentice in 2004. That show, including the release 2.0 Celebrity Apprentice, introduced and defined Trump for most Americans as a quasi-fictional business genius in a reality TV genre with the emphasis on the quote marks. In the real business world, Trump barely survived multiple bankruptcies. But that detail didn't matter, not for the ratings-obsessed Zucker, not for the self-described rating machine Trump, and not for tens of millions of fans. When Trump launched his real presidential campaign in 2015, the Trump phenomenon was again fueled by the still rating-obsessed but now CNN boss Zucker. CNN provided extensive coverage of Trump, including broadcasting an empty podium before an event started. TV and Zucker were the driving forces behind the Trump phenomenon. Zelensky was defined for Ukrainian voters through essentially the same process, by his 100% fictional Servant of the People TV show. But how much does this distinction between fiction and reality matter anymore? We have to wonder. Aren't most people swayed by the characters and the ideas they're presented with? Don't we assume that actors are playing themselves? We should also note another important similarity between our quasi and entirely fictional celebrity characters, a religious appeal. Please help me here. I don't know of any instance where Trump has actually claimed to be a Christian himself. My own view is that the values and ideas he promotes are wildly at variance with the Sermon on the Mount and with what Jesus preached. However, many place emphasis on a two kingdoms idea advanced as part of the Reformation. Trump has certainly formed an alliance with what is loosely called the religious right. More recently, 3 of his Supreme Court nominees are at the core of an apparent majority that is about to overturn Roe v. Wade. Although Zelensky is himself Jewish, it appears the character he plays is not. It also appears that there are many appeals in Servant of the People to religious beliefs of Ukrainians, who are overwhelmingly Orthodox Christians. As we're seeing now, Zelensky's character is unmistakably presented as a religious figure.
Привыкайте, Василий Петрович. Теперь у вас началась совсем другая жизнь. Да. Можно сказать, у вас сегодня 2-й день рождения.
Точно. Я забыл, сегодня у моей племянницы день рождения.
Let's now consider more closely what Russia accomplished in America's 2016 presidential election. There's a but-for test in law. Here's the application. But for the Russian interference in 2016, Donald Trump would not have been elected president. Special counsel Robert Mueller's report wasn't about specific collusion by Trump. Its title is Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 presidential election. It begins, the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Beyond that fact, 3 states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, with 46 electoral votes, more than Trump's margin of victory, all went to Trump by less than 1%. The evidence of successful Russian regime change in America in the 2016 presidential election is overwhelming. But let's back up and try to think more precisely about what regime was being changed. Here's my assessment. Before Trump, from the progressive era forward, America has had an ongoing regime consisting of 2 national parties that have had significant and continuing differences, but that also shared a common commitment to 3 basic principles. While I have many serious criticisms of this 100-plus year regime, first and foremost, that it has always been essentially authoritarian. Let's leave that aside. In a dangerous, unstable world, America's progressive authoritarian regime has offered 3 great advantages that have favored peace and stability. First, both parties understood and accepted that while they might currently be dominant, there would come a time when the other party will be dominant. Second, each party accepted the legitimacy of the other party, and both were committed to seeking bipartisan compromises and solutions. Those compromises and solutions, and I include the New Deal and civil rights legislation of the 1960s among them, have moved America forward. Third, both parties have always agreed to accept the results of each election, even knowing that the process may be flawed, and even knowing that a given particular election can reasonably be seen as having been stolen. This was true in 1960, when many believed the Democrats stole the presidential election from Richard Nixon. It was true in 2000, when many believed Florida's popular vote count was manipulated to give George W. Bush, whose brother Jeb was Florida's governor, his margin of victory in the Electoral College. In 2016, many believed Trump's election was not legitimate. But let's make a distinction for 2016. Whether Russia's 2016 interference is identical to or comparable to stealing is debatable. I say that Russian regime change in America was accomplished by interfering, as a better descriptive word than stealing. Regarding the commitment of our American regime to accept election results, let's be more specific. For the 3 cases noted, 1960, 2000, and 2016, the losing party and presidential candidate explicitly and peacefully accepted the result. In both 1960 and 2000, Richard Nixon and Al Gore were serving as vice president. They both personally presided over the electoral vote count and announced their own defeat. In 2016, Vice President Joe Biden presided over another peaceful transfer of power, announcing Donald Trump had been elected president. Hillary Clinton conceded the election the morning after Trump won, and she attended Trump's inauguration. Since Russia's successful 2016 regime change in America, America's former progressive authoritarian regime is gone. America's new Russian-backed regime is fundamentally different in 3 key ways. First, both parties are dominated by a relatively small number of extremists. Second, members of both parties are being bombarded with the message that the other party is dangerous and illegitimate. Third, instead of remaining neutral and trying to unite us, our corporate culture and our media in particular are responding to powerful pressures to take sides. News and other organizations now cater to one party and have become increasingly hostile to the other party. These three trend lines are all explicit goals of Russia and Putin. In mid-2021, Putin distributed a 7,000-word essay to the entire Russian military and ordered everyone to read it. He was accusing the West of pursuing a divide and rule strategy in Ukraine. Here's a key passage. I'll repeat it, but with one word change, substituting Americans for people. Putin said this: "First of all, I would like to emphasize that the wall that has emerged in recent years between Russia and Ukraine, between the parts of what is essentially the same historical and spiritual space, to my mind, is our great common misfortune and tragedy. These are, first and foremost, the consequences of our own mistakes made at different periods of time. But these are also the results of deliberate efforts by those forces that have always sought to undermine our unity. The formula they apply has been known from time immemorial. Now, here comes the key passage, but I substitute Americans for people. Divide and rule. There is nothing new here. Hence the attempts to play on the national question and sow discord among Americans, the overarching goal being to divide and then to pit the parts of a single people against one another. This is the Russian regime change in America strategy of Vladimir Putin. Divide and rule America. And it is working. We must reverse it. Here's what I think we all need to do. First, we should reflect on how much we are shaped by the psychological and behavioral conditioning environment we live in. This is something I elaborate on in my book, I, Governor of Minnesota. In one sense, many of us are ever more able to self-select our environment by choosing organizations and media experiences that are in our personal comfort zone. Unfortunately, we are lacking media sources that seek to present all points of view, and that aren't always desperately trying to grab our attention. We all need to make this deliberate commitment, try mightily to identify and reject the efforts of people and organizations to control our thoughts and our behavior. This is the only way that we can create a demand for news coverage that presents all sides and does not provide a platform for hatred and division. Media will supply this for the same reason it supplies hatred and division today: ratings. Our challenge, ending the regime of hate-inducing and division-inducing news, can only be successfully met from the demand side, us. Trying to regulate and reform our way out of this dumpster fire can only result in a censorship bureaucracy. Second, in our political thinking and action, we must make a deliberate personal commitment not to inflame or provoke. More specifically, we must be committed to nonviolence. Trump is deliberately leading Republicans to accept political violence as legitimate. I believe he clearly incited it in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by his supporters. More on this is coming up. We must carefully examine the nonviolent tactics of Mahatma Gandhi, which led to India's independence with incomparably less death and suffering than we saw in the Russian Revolution and in Stalin's purges and human-caused famines. We must carefully study President Eisenhower's warning about a military-industrial complex and the agenda of arms manufacturers in the shaping of recent events in Ukraine.
Граждане, не будьте так любезны, пропустите президента без очереди. С какого перепугу? Ване очереди все равны. Да, пожалуйста.
Я отработаю. Спасибо, извините.
Леночка, здрасте.
У Леночки сегодня выходной, я ее подменяю. Позвольте представиться, Бугай Анатолий Борисович, председатель правления банка.
Очень. Да. Я по поводу кредита, если можно. Смотрите у себя. Голобородько Василий Петрович.
Василий Петрович, ваш кредит полностью погашен.
Не может быть, какая-то ошибка. У меня оставалось еще 7 платежей.
Дело в том, что наш банк один раз в году проводит акцию, победителю которой прощаются все долги. Вы и есть этот победитель.
Не потому что я...
Ну что вы, господин президент, слепой зрение.
Да. Ну ладно, приятно, неожиданно. Хорошо, да,
Да,
спасибо.
пожалуйста.
Поздравляю. Вас тоже поздравляю. Да, до свидания.
Заходи.
Зайду, да.
Товарищи офицеры, благодарю за экстренный сбор.
Служу народу Украины!
А вы, капитан Пилипчук, в следующий раз, пожалуйста, без самодеятельности.
Виноват, Юрий Иванович. Хотел, чтобы все было натурально.
Ну-ну.
We must also study Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler's 1935 book, War is a Racket. We must ask, wouldn't it have been better if President Zelensky had renounced NATO membership rather than continuing to seek it up to days before the start of the war? I am convinced the war in Ukraine could have been avoided. Since it was not avoided, we of course must also affirm that Russia was wrong to have started it. Putin's Russia is a case study of authoritarian groupthink in action. Third, as Republicans, we need to ensure that former President Trump is legally prevented from being on the 2024 ballot. My book, We Must Stop Trump, lays out 3 ways to do this. I'll just highlight 2. One is a congressionally mandated, original jurisdiction Supreme Court criminal trial of Donald Trump for inciting and setting on foot the insurrection leading to the violent January 6, 2021 attack on our Capitol. A conviction, including a plea bargain, which I favor, would disqualify him from being president. I'm calling on Professor Richard Painter to participate with me in 1 or more YouTube or Zoom discussions of this option.
Михаил Семенович, вы молодец.
А я тут ни при чем.
Перестаньте. Мы же все понимаем, что это твой человек.
Нет, я был уверен, что Голобородько это твой человек.
Ясно. Если не твой, не мой, значит, это человек Рустема Ашотовича.
Господа, клянусь, я не имею к Голобородько никакого отношения.
А кто же тогда имеет?
Вы хотите сказать, что страну возглавил человек неподконтрольный никому из нас? Смешно.
Кто-то из нас темнит.
Может, он ставленник Запада? Или Кремля?
Кривицкий, я должен знать об этом Голобородько. Все. Разберемся.
Вы, пожалуйста.
Second, we should amend the Constitution to provide that no one over 75 years old can exercise the powers and duties of the office of president. My book, I, Governor of Minnesota, is available on Amazon in both paperback and ebook format.
Уважаемый журналист, я прошу прощения, я не готов к этой пресс-конференции. Сложно отвечать на неподготовленные вопросы, поэтому давайте с вами договоримся. Я подготовлюсь, и вы устроите мне пересдачу. А вторую, повторную пресс-конференцию. Хорошо, потому что я честно вам скажу, я значение некоторых терминов даже не знаю.
Неудивительно. Судя по избирательному ролику, вам ближе другая лексика.
Девушка, вам слова никто не давал.
О, ну ничего не меняется. То есть слово у нас дается только тем, кому выдаются слова заранее, да?
И почему, девушка, у нас свобода слова, насколько мне известно, в стране. Так что, если у вас есть ко мне вопрос, пожалуйста, задавайте.
Да? Неужели? Яна Клименко, журнал «Прозорая Влада». Скажите, пожалуйста, где обычный учитель истории взял 2 миллиона для взноса в Центр избирком?
Следующий вопрос, пожалуйста.
Не нужно, Юрий Иванович. Уважаемая Яна Клименко, Вот как раз на этот вопрос я отвечу без труда. Все, ребята, урок окончен. Если есть вопросы, пожалуйста.
Василий Петрович,
Да.
когда вы пойдете регистрироваться?
Куда регистрироваться, Рус?
Я куда? В ЦВК на выборы президента.
Ребят, ну хватит. Посмеялся, все хорошо провели время. 5 миллионов людей посмеялись.
Не
Достаточно?
5, а 8.
И все за вас. Вы комменты читали?
Левченко, комменты давно не читаю. Ты потом, как вы смеете это видеть? Не может в нашей стране простой человек стать президентом.
Почему?
Во-первых, для того, чтобы зарегистрироваться в ЦВК, нужно как минимум 2 миллиона гривен. А откуда у простого учителя такие деньги?
Так ви про краудфандинг чули? Короче, мы в нете объявили сбор денег.
Как говорится, с миру по гривне. И вот у вас на счету почти 2 миллиона гривен. Точнее, 2 миллиона и 8 гривен.
Окончен урок, все свободны.
Да, Василий Петрович, это вы ее здорово отбили. Краудфандинг. Хорошее слово, надо запомнить. Поверьте старому политическому волку, вы далеко пойдете. А если честно, между нами, откуда деньги?
Так, правда, краудфандинг.
Ну, не хотите говорить? Не надо.
Василий Петрович, эти деньги собрал вам народ. Хотите, дайте их в ЦВК, хотите, купите квартиру, хотите, сожгите. Делайте с ними что хотите.
Я не могу
До
взять.
свидания.
Я не могу взять.
О, нифига себе! Мать, я тебе говорил, что он никакой не учитель. Либо наркотиками, либо органами торгует, а может и тем и другим.
The situation in Ukraine and the Russian regime change that was carried out successfully when Donald Trump was elected were too important to ignore. Unfortunately, addressing them has taken up the available time. I'm producing a video supplement to this convention speech, summing up some important positive agenda items. Moving to wrap up, I'm looking for a lieutenant governor running mate and opening this to all eligible Minnesotans. See my website, www.votebobagain.com, for more information. I'm also doing fundraising. Information on that is available on the website. And finally, I'm planning to do daily Zoom sessions, typically at 7 p.m. Everyone is invited to participate in those. I'm Bobagain Carney Jr., asking for your vote for Governor of Minnesota. Thanks for listening.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Добрый вечер. Простите, что без звонка, дверь была открыта. Дорогая Наталья, от имени президента Украины поздравляем вас с днем рождения. Диско Дидзё не нашли, поэтому выкрутились как смогли.
Happy birthday!
Днем народження, Наталя! Так багато дівчат, але я вибрав тебе. Я не вірив в любов, та цепануло мене. Я люблю, коли сплю, я від тебе дурію. Я до всього ревную, я від тебе балдію. Йой, тебе не любить моя мама. О-о-о, а ти для мене сама. Йой, тебе не любить моя мама. О-о-о, а ти для мене сама. Я не спав цілу ніч, думав тільки про тебе. Щось від антилюбі, срочно випити треба. Ти купила мене неземною красою. Мені кришу зриває, хочу бути з тобою. Йой, тебе не любить моя мама.
Almost forgot, I'm Bobagain Carney Jr., and I approve this message. Let's be clear, this is a political ad that you've been watching.